Today we delve into the intricate and multifaceted origins of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which began in 2014. This isn't just about territorial disputes or political maneuvering, it's about a shared history, a complex tapestry of cultures and identities, and ultimately, a struggle for the future of a nation. We'll journey back to the heart of the issue, exploring the events and grievances that have fueled this conflict. From the streets of Kiev to the halls of power in Moscow, we'll unravel the narratives, dissect the motivations, and examine the human toll of this ongoing crisis. This is a story of protest and annexation, of separatist movements and geopolitical chess matches. But most importantly, it's a story about people, families divided, lives disrupted, and a yearning for peace and stability in a region teetering on the brink. The year 2014 marked a turning point in Ukraine's history. The country found itself at a crossroads, grappling with its identity and its place in the world. For many Ukrainians, particularly in the West, the pull towards Europe, towards democratic ideals and economic integration was strong. This desire for closer ties with the European Union ignited a wave of protests that would come to be known as the Euromaidan movement. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets, demanding an end to corruption, a more accountable government, and a future aligned with the West.
These protests weren't simply about signing agreements. They were about a vision for Ukraine's future, one that diverged sharply from the path laid out by then-President Viktor Yanukovych, who favored closer ties with Russia. The demonstrations, fueled by a potent mix of idealism and anger, were met with a brutal crackdown by government forces. Images of violence against unarmed protesters shocked the world, further galvanizing international attention on the unfolding crisis in Ukraine.
The situation in Kyiv, the capital, grew increasingly volatile as the standoff between protesters and the government intensified. The air crackled with tension, uncertainty hanging heavy over Independence Square, the epicenter of the protests. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed, a sense of unity and purpose emerged among the protesters. They built barricades, established makeshift medical facilities, and stood their ground against a government they felt no longer represented them. The Euromaidan protests weren't just about politics. They were about dignity, about having a voice, and about the right to determine one's own destiny.
The spirit of resistance, the unwavering belief in a better future, resonated far beyond the borders of Ukraine. These protests, fueled by the aspirations of ordinary citizens, laid bare the deep divisions within Ukrainian society, divisions that would have profound and lasting consequences. The world watched as a nation grappled with its identity on the streets of Kiev, the echoes of their struggle reverberating far beyond the borders of Ukraine.
The Euromaidan protests were a testament to the power of the human spirit, a stark reminder that the yearning for freedom and self-determination cannot be silenced, even in the face of overwhelming force. As the Euromaidan protests raged in Kyiv, a separate drama was unfolding in the Crimean Peninsula, a region with a predominantly Russian-speaking population and a long, complex history intertwined with Russia's own. Exploiting the instability and political vacuum created by the upheaval in Kiev, Russia made a strategic move that would send shockwaves through the international community. In February 2014, Russian troops, often described as little green men due to their unmarked uniforms, fanned out across Crimea, effectively taking control of the peninsula.
A hastily organized referendum, widely condemned as illegitimate by the international community, was held, with the outcome a foregone conclusion. The results were undeniable. An overwhelming majority of voters, under the watchful eyes of Russian forces, opted to secede from Ukraine and join the Russian Federation. The annexation of Crimea was swift and decisive, a calculated gamble by the Kremlin that ultimately paid off.
The international community reacted with condemnation, imposing sanctions on Russia, but the peninsula remained firmly under Russian control. The seizure of Crimea marked a turning point in the relationship between Russia and the West, ushering in a new era of mistrust and hostility. It also exposed the limitations of the international community in responding to acts of aggression, particularly when nuclear-armed powers are involved. For Ukraine, the loss of Crimea was a profound blow, a violation of its sovereignty and a stark illustration of Russia's willingness to use military force to achieve its geopolitical objectives.
The annexation of Crimea sent a clear message to the world. Russia was reasserting itself on the world stage, and old rules no longer applied. The ramifications of this bold move continue to reverberate today, shaping the geopolitical landscape and setting the stage for the broader conflict that would engulf eastern Ukraine. The world watched as the map of Europe was redrawn, the balance of power shifting once more.
The annexation of Crimea served as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring power of nationalism in the 21st century. The events of February 2014 in Crimea were a watershed moment, a stark reminder that the ghosts of history long thought buried can re-emerge with a vengeance, reshaping the geopolitical landscape and plunging a region into turmoil. The international community condemned the annexation, but the reality on the ground remained unchanged. Crimea, once a popular tourist destination known for its scenic beauty, had become a pawn in a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. The seizure of Crimea had far-reaching consequences, exacerbating tensions between Russia and the West and setting the stage for a protracted conflict in eastern Ukraine. As Russia consolidated its hold on Crimea, a new front was opening in the east of Ukraine, a region with deep historical and cultural ties to Russia, where a significant portion of the population identified as ethnic Russians and Russian speakers.
Fueled by a potent mix of pro-Russian sentiment, economic grievances, and fears of marginalization in the wake of the Euromaidan revolution, separatist movements began to emerge in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, collectively known as the Donbas.
These movements, claiming to represent the interests of the Russian-speaking population in the east, quickly gained traction, tapping into a wellspring of resentment towards the new government in Kiev, which they perceived as illegitimate and hostile to their interests.
Armed groups, allegedly backed by Russian military intelligence and equipped with sophisticated weaponry, began seizing government buildings, setting up checkpoints, and declaring independence from Ukraine.
The Ukrainian government, still reeling from the loss of Crimea, found itself facing a new and formidable challenge, a burgeoning insurgency in the east, fueled by external support and determined to break away from Ukraine.
What began as a series of protests and demonstrations quickly escalated into a full-blown armed conflict, with Ukrainian government forces clashing with separatist fighters in a deadly dance of artillery duels, urban warfare, and bitter trench battles reminiscent of a bygone era.
The conflict in eastern Ukraine, often described as a frozen conflict, became a grinding war of attrition marked by ceasefires that were routinely violated and a devastating human toll that continued to mount with each passing day.
The conflict took on a particularly brutal dimension in the summer of 2014 when Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, was shot down over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 people on board.
The downing of MH17, allegedly by a Russian-made missile, sent shockwaves through the international community, underscoring the global implications of this seemingly regional conflict and the urgent need for a peaceful resolution.
The conflict in eastern Ukraine, now in its 9th year, has claimed the lives of thousands of people, displaced millions from their homes, and left a trail of destruction and despair in its wake.
The conflict in eastern Ukraine is a stark reminder of the human cost of geopolitical rivalries, a tragic testament to the enduring power of division and the urgent need for dialogue and reconciliation in a region torn apart by conflict. To truly understand the roots of the conflict in Ukraine, one must delve into the complex tapestry of history, language, and identity that has shaped this region for centuries. Ukraine, positioned at the crossroads of East and West, has long been a melting pot of cultures and languages, a bridge between Russia and Europe. This rich tapestry, however, also carries within it the seeds of division and conflict. Language, in particular, has become a deeply politicized issue in Ukraine, a fault line that often mirrors the geopolitical divide between Russia and the West. For many ethnic Russians living in Ukraine, particularly in the East and South, Russian is their mother tongue, the language of their daily lives, their culture and their heritage. They often perceive policies promoting Ukrainian language and culture as a threat to their identity and a form of discrimination. On the other hand, many Ukrainians, particularly in the West, view the Russian language as a tool of oppression, a vestige of centuries of Russian domination. and an impediment to the development of a distinct Ukrainian national identity. This linguistic divide has been exploited by both sides of the conflict, fueling narratives of oppression and victimhood, further deepening the chasm between communities and hindering efforts at reconciliation. The reality, however, is far more nuanced than simple binaries of pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian. Identities are fluid, often defying easy categorization. Many Ukrainians feel a strong connection to both Russia and Europe, navigating the complexities of their shared history and multiple cultural influences. The conflict in Ukraine is not simply a battle over territorial resources. It is a struggle over identity, a battle for the hearts and minds of a people caught between East and West. Understanding these complex historical and cultural nuances is crucial to comprehending the drivers of the conflict and to finding a path towards a lasting and sustainable peace. The international community must engage with the conflict in Ukraine through a nuanced lens, recognizing the legitimacy of diverse identities and aspirations. Imposing simplistic solutions or taking sides will only exacerbate existing divisions and prolong the suffering of the Ukrainian people. Ultimately, the path to peace in Ukraine lies in fostering dialogue, promoting understanding, and recognizing the shared humanity that binds all sides of this tragic conflict. The international community must support initiatives that bridge the divides, promoting language learning, cultural exchange, and people-to-people diplomacy. Only through genuine reconciliation and a recognition of shared history and intertwined destinies can Ukraine hope to heal the wounds of this conflict and build a more peaceful and prosperous future. The story of Ukraine is a reminder that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, equality, and the recognition of the inherent dignity of every individual, regardless of their language, ethnicity, or cultural background. While the internal dynamics of language, identity, and historical grievances are crucial to understanding the conflict in Ukraine, the broader geopolitical context cannot be ignored. Ukraine, strategically located on the border of Russia and Europe, has become a focal point in the struggle for influence between Russia and the West, particularly the United States and the European Union.
For Russia, Ukraine holds immense strategic importance. It serves as a buffer zone between Russia and NATO, a military alliance that Moscow views with deep suspicion, seeing its eastward expansion as a direct threat to its security and a betrayal of post-Cold War promises.
The prospect of Ukraine joining NATO, a red line for Moscow, has been a source of constant tension and a key driver of Russia's actions in the region.
From Moscow's perspective, the West's attempts to draw Ukraine into its orbit represent an encroachment upon its sphere of influence and a threat to its core interests.
The United States and its European allies, on the other hand, view Russia's actions in Ukraine as a violation of international law and a challenge to the post-Cold War order. They see Ukraine's right to self-determination and its aspirations for closer ties with the West as paramount.
This clash of perspectives, this struggle for influence and security, has turned Ukraine into a geopolitical chessboard, with both sides making calculated moves and countermoves, often at the expense of the Ukrainian people caught in the middle.
The conflict in Ukraine is a stark reminder of the dangers of zero-sum thinking in international relations. The pursuit of security at the expense of another's security, the belief that one nation's gain must come at another's loss, is a recipe for instability and conflict.
The international community must move beyond Cold War paradigms and work towards a new security architecture in Europe, one that addresses the legitimate security concerns of all parties involved, including Russia, and creates a framework for cooperation and coexistence.
Dialogue, diplomacy, and a commitment to finding common ground are essential to resolving the conflict in Ukraine and preventing future crises. The alternative, a protracted conflict that could escalate into a wider European war, is too dangerous to contemplate.
The conflict in Ukraine is a wake-up call, a stark reminder that the ghosts of the Cold War still haunt us, and that the path to peace and security lies in dialogue, understanding, and a shared commitment to a more just and equitable world order.
The world is watching, hoping for a peaceful resolution to this crisis. The future of Ukraine, and indeed the stability of Europe, hangs in the balance. The conflict in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved, and it's a conflict that has claimed the lives of thousands, displaced millions, and shattered the peace and stability of a nation. As we've explored, the roots of this conflict run deep, intertwined with history, language, identity, and geopolitics. Understanding the roots of this conflict is crucial to comprehending its ongoing impact and the broader geopolitical implications. The conflict in Ukraine is not just a regional issue. It is a global crisis with the potential to escalate into a wider conflict with far-reaching consequences. Stay informed, and thank you for watching.